Hey y'all, Tim Risto here. Welcome back to another episode of Afterthoughts. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you're having a great day, and may God bless the rest of your day. You know, here at Afterthoughts, we've been talking a lot. We've been on this topic of faith-based films, Christian films in particular. But one area that we haven't really discussed much yet is Bible movies or Bible epics, or films or TV adaptations, based on Bible stories or the Bible itself in different ways, shapes, or form. So, many of you, probably like I do, have fond memories of watching those biblical epics on TV back in the day. I grew up watching things like, Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments from 1956 that got shown on TV for decades to come after that. Or films like Jesus of Nazareth, or Ben-Hur with that famous chariot race. Or I even remember a TV movie called Masada, based on the battle at Masada, on the mountaintop of Masada. Some that were more directly based on very specific Bible stories or very direct stories from the Bible, and others that were more kind of loosely based on or adapted on things from the Bible. But may have very fond memories of that, like I do, of those different films. So I started thinking about, how did those films maybe influence what your perception of the Bible was, what you learned from the Bible, maybe of specific Bible texts. Did it help influence you positively, or help you learn things, about the Bible, see it in a different light than perhaps you had from just, having read the Bible? So when I saw this article here over on BeliefNet this morning, I thought this would be kind of interesting. And it talks about learning, what you'll learn, some things you can learn from watching Bible movies. So let's take a look at this real quick. The headline here reads, 4 things you'll learn from watching Bible movies. Every message is different, they say. This is by Lauren McKeithen. Again, this is at BeliefNet.com. The only problem I have with these BeliefNet articles is they don't have a date specifically on the page itself. So I don't really know when they were written or when they were released. So it's always tough to figure out how current some of these articles actually are. Unless I can pick up details from within the article itself that may give a hint to that. But that's kind of the only qualm I have with some of these. But let's punch in here and see what they have to say. Most people raised in the church grew up watching Bible movies, from TV adaptations to feature films. They've also watched their fair share of movies inspired by biblical events, like Ben-Hur or The Little Drummer Boy. Obviously, not every adaptation was great. Some were liked very much, like The Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille, while others weren't the movie that was expected. I think we could probably say The Last Temptation of Christ from 1988 was one that definitely was not what people expected and was deeply divisive for many obvious reasons. Some were funny in the way filmmakers maybe didn't intend. I've talked about that here before too. Christian films have always struggled with humor. Biblical epics are no different. Many times, even the flawed Bible films surprise them and challenge them to read the Bible better. Probably The Passion of Christ is one that motivated people to dig deeper into the Bible. Here are some things that you can learn from watching Bible movies, including recommendations for some good ones. So let's see what they've got. First point they bring up here is the best Bible films come from unexpected places. Okay, I can probably buy that. Let's see what points they raise here. Sticking with the Bible films we were given as kids is tempting. Sometimes those films are great. However, the more you expand your sights, the more you discover treasures. Yeah, I think I'd get on board with that. Movies made in different countries can challenge you to see Bible stories differently. For example, Joseph the Dreamer, the first stop-motion film made in Israel, can help you consider how Jewish audiences interpret Jewish people's suffering in the Bible. Now that's interesting, and I was not familiar with this particular film. It's obviously an older one because it was the first stop-motion film made in Israel. So I popped on over to IMDb to check this out a little bit. There's the poster for it. This was made in 1962. So, and it is available on YouTube if you want to go check it out. I'll put a link in the description below. It's very quaint. It's that 60s stop motion, that 60s style of stop motion animation. So if you're familiar with, the Christmas specials that used to be on TV every year, annually, every Christmas, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus Comes to Town, all those type of ones, Little Drummer Boy. That style of 60s stop motion animation is pretty much what this mirrors, although this probably isn't even as smooth or as up to the quality that those were. And not that those were super high quality, but those Rankin Bass stop motion animation films kind of had a certain charm and appeal about them. This probably isn't quite as good as that even, but it's interesting. Definitely a product of its time. I haven't watched the whole thing, but their point, I suppose, if I watched it, that movie can help you consider how Jewish audiences interpret Jewish people's suffering in the Bible. Interesting. I mean, I'd kind of like to watch it just to see how that point does come across. Movies with uncommon perspectives are equally interesting. For example, Genesis, Creation, and the Flood features how essential the nomadic tribe context is in the Old Testament. Again, not one I'm familiar with. I had to go over and look at that. And this is from 1984, Genesis, the Creation, and the Flood. Just not something I'm real familiar with. It looks like it was narrated by Paul Scofield. There are some actors listed here. I don't know if they had any lines or if it was, they were just on screen visually and the narration carried this. I'd have to check it out. But again, to their point, apparently it offers this perspective, how essential the nomadic tribe context is in the Old Testament. So interesting. I think that is something that certain films can really offer. Bible films can really offer is punching into certain areas or themes to provide some added context to, when the stories took place, what was happening. You can also find well-crafted Bible films in unexpected places like Testament, the Bible in Animation, a series of biblical cartoons by Russian and Welsh animators. Again, not something I'm familiar with at all. Curious about it. I haven't looked that one up yet. Despite a modest budget, it produced better told and better looking Bible stories than most glossy American cartoons. Seeking Bible films outside Christian bookstore shelves or our church library can be challenging. Do many churches have video libraries anymore? There's why I'm always concerned about, there's no date on this article. How old is this article? I'm not sure. And it talks about a series of biblical cartoons by this Russian and Welsh animators. Again, I get their context as talking about some other perspectives by filmmakers in other countries. But if you look at more modern examples, say we jump over here to the Bible Project. Probably most of you are familiar with the Bible Project on YouTube. They have tons of great animated videos that help to kind of illustrate different Bible stories or themes in the Bible or concepts of the Bible. Very well known. They've got over 4.4 million subscribers and 432 videos. This article doesn't list modern things like that, so I'm questioning the age of this article now. The next point here is Bible movies are typically about when they were made. It says here, every Bible film is informed by its filmmaking period. Yeah, that's true, but I would say that's true of any film. The title of this article is 4 Things You Learn from Watching Bible Movies. Any movie is a product of its time it was made. If a film has a lot more pop cultural references in it, it's probably not going to age as well as one that doesn't have as many. That's a little more general. So all films really are, about the time they were made in. So I'm not sure that one's really quite as specific to Bible films. I don't think it is. They all begin with a basic story to retell, like Moses and the burning bush or Joseph and his brothers. When they made these movies, they created factors influencing how they told that story. These factors include what filmmaking styles were fashionable, what was happening in world politics. Again, that's true of all films. And how biblical scholars interpreted texts at the time. Okay, yeah, that's Bible specific there. Once you recognize every Bible movie is a time capsule of its period, you can consider how time affects the story. For example, the 1956 version of the Ten Commandments was informed by the Cold War. Yeah, so again, I think that's just a factor of every film. I understand how, it can be Bible specific, but again, it doesn't really jive with the headline of the article here. Take, for example, Casablanca. That was made in, 1942, 1945, either during or at the tail end of of World War II. So a product of its time, right? If you tried to make that today, it would probably be influenced by either recent wars. Somebody would make it about, this isn't terribly recent, but a lot of films were often a parallel for Vietnam, or now the Iraq War, or today it might be the Ukraine War, or something like that. There would be a context set in regard to something happening in modern times. So again, that's all films that I think are influenced by the filmmaking period. But certainly, Bible movies are not immune to that. So, and that's probably really more their point. As they go on to say here, Moses and Pharaoh were two significant power blocks, refusing to back down from each other's wishes. Nowadays, we try not to complain about a Bible movie if we haven't considered its context, and we remember that each one was made by people moving with the times, and that those people typically talk about today as much as they're talking about the Bible. And that's a valid point. All right, next point here is even Bible movies have cliches. Oh, so true. As you watch Bible films from different styles and periods, you realize how much you're informed by the ones you grew up with. We all create biases from the first Bible story adaptations we encounter, like books, cartoons, or movies. As we grow, we should examine those biases. For example, you may be surprised that the Bible collection Joseph made Potiphar sympathetic. In this version, Potiphar doubted his wife's claims that Joseph attacked her and imprisoned Joseph as a compromise. However, Genesis 39:19 says that Potiphar was upset when he heard about what Joseph allegedly did. Most Bible adaptations we were raised on showed Potiphar as an angry man who believed his wife and punished Joseph with prison time. However, we should also consider Richard James and E. Randolph Richards' book, Misreading Scriptures with Individualist Eyes. Something I'm not familiar with. I did look it up over here on Amazon, and I don't know this book at all or much about the perspective of its author, but it looks kind of intriguing. Might be something I'll have to check out. So anyway, but it's true, of course. Any film, me growing up on the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments, I know there's a lot of stuff in there that's not biblically accurate, so you have to be careful of all that. The authors emphasize that Potiphar could have killed Joseph because he was a professional executioner, and everyone would have expected him to kill Joseph. The fact that Potiphar only imprisoned Joseph means that something else was going on. His culture emphasized the family's good and the estate's future, so we were likely enraged at his tough position. The issue wasn't the movie. The problem was that we're used to Bible adaptations that show Potiphar in a certain way. Part of watching Bible movies well is loving God with all our minds, as detailed in Mark 12:30. Mark 12:30, by the way, is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. As detailed in Mark 12:30, including developing discernment. As we learn to discern, we should look at Bible movies. This is good. As we learn to discern, we should look at Bible movies and ask whether the film engages with the text context or follows cliches. Every Bible film is informed by what came before, and the best filmmakers realize this and do their homework to stop rehashing the past. Keep it fresh. Of course, that's every filmmaker tries to strive to do something different while remaining true, in this case, to the biblical context too. So here's the last point here is the Bible isn't always kid-friendly. And since most of us find the Bible in Sunday school, we typically assume Bible movies must be family-friendly. When we reread Bible stories as adults, we realize that those stories often have mature moments. We also learn that the Bible has things we might find strange. We can particularly appreciate how the Bible collection, Jeremiah, again, something I'm not familiar with, reminds us that God told this Old Testament prophet to do drastic things while giving his prophecies. The Bible has shocking and strange ideas, and at least some of the Bible movies we watch should reflect that variety. This isn't an advocation for X-rated Bible movies, but the opposite doesn't help either. We miss the point when we expect every Bible story adaptation to be family-friendly. However, there are some family-friendly Bible movies like The Ballad of Little Joe, the VeggieTales adaptation of Joseph's story, and the Bible collection Joseph. Our vision for Bible movies should include both options, giving adaptations to every age group and challenging us to study the Bible better. I'm in agreement with that, and I think there should be some grittier Bible epics, definitely. And we've seen more of that. Obviously, Passion of the Christ was one that kind of kick-started the quote-unquote R-rated, the more graphic in terms of violence, Bible epic, Bible story. We've seen some others since then too. Actually, even Risen, kind of a more recent film, had a little grittier element to it too, and a number of others too. So I think that helps to enhance an understanding of not only the story, but the period in which it took place and the events that were active during that time period. So good point. Last line here is every Bible film balances several elements, past and present, cliches, creative vision, budgets, and new research. The best ones take all of these elements and produce something entertaining, but they make us think more about the Bible's teachings. Very, very true, and I think a point well taken. There's a point that I would add to this list that's not on here. Again, the headline is 4 things you'll learn from watching Bible movies. I think one thing you'll learn is that these movies are not the Bible. They are not the text. Even those, like I think it's the story of John, the Gospel of John, was a kind of faithful word-for-word use of the biblical text set to kind of visuals of Jesus' life story. But even that is still not the Bible. Yes, the words are the actual scriptural text, but the visuals, even in terms of shot choice, whether you have a wide shot, a medium shot, a close-up at a specific moment in that text, conveys meaning. And that may not be totally in sync with what, the original text would convey. It might translate a slightly different meaning, might add a close-up that has an emotion in a moment that really it may not actually demand, the text may not demand that. So even things like that, it's all just an interpretation of the Bible. Films are not the Bible itself, as close as some may attempt to be to scriptural authenticity. They still are not the Bible. You can't replace, obviously, reading the text itself, just in and of itself. So that would be a point I would add to it. But anyway, I just thought this was kind of a little interesting. There's some interesting things in this article. How have biblical films been an influence in your life? What have you learned from watching biblical films? Have they helped influence you in your faith life, in your understanding of the Bible, or have they been more of a detriment for you? I'd be curious to hear your comments down below. Let me know. What do you think of Bible movies? Do you have a favorite one? And again, what kind of influences have these type films had in your life? I suspect a lot will comment on Passion of the Christ, but whatever biblical film has had an influence in your life, I'd love to hear about it. That's all I've got for today. Y'all have a great day. Remember, above all else, stay in God's Word. See you next time. Bye-bye.